Well, I'm delighted to talk about an event which has been such an easy and simple event to put together, and yet one that's had a remarkable impact. So I want to tell you 3 stories within one. First story is the fun one, and it's about the actual event itself. Second part of the story is to tell you a little bit about how the event came about and how to sustain an event like this and sustain the impact of that event. And the third part is the question, and that is the What If Africa one. And I'll tease you a little bit by saying where I'm going to in this and where the conclusion is, what if Africa had to design its urban spaces such that they were water-sensitive urban cities? Water-sensitive cities. And that's where we're going to. So what are the implications for that? And what could that mean for African cities? What could that mean for South African cities? What could that mean for Cape Town? There are lots of implications. And why water? Why not energy? Why not food security and other things? Well, when you start to think about this, water runs through everything. And that might help you as you go through the slides here to connect with a very simple exercise and how that brings our landscape, our urban landscape, closer in the connection to our waterways. How do we bring people closer to the waterways around us is part of what this campaign is all about. It's a delightful campaign in which it's a fun one, happen once a year, as close as we can to the World Environment Day. And it's an 11-hour event. We climb in the water at Muizenberg Beach in Cape Town, and we go through the waterways until we get to the other side of the ocean. We go in from the Indian to the Atlantic Ocean in 11 hours. This is roughly what the map looks like, and that's our journey through the waterways. And you have to come and paddle with us at some stage for us to tell you the slightly fun secret as to how we get across those waterways. And we are using non-motorized transport from one side to the other. There's the journey. It takes us 27 kilometers through some of the most awkward environments that Cape Town has to offer. And you'll see that just now in a little video clip. first just begin by closing the story to some extent from the video clip, is just to look at that statement which says the health of the city is seen in its waterways. Wouldn't it be interesting if we had to use the waterways as an indicator of understanding how well that city functioned, how well its service delivery was being performed, how well its housing delivery was being performed, how well the education and behavior of people within the city were performing. And so it's quite a useful one, quite a useful indicator to have a look at that. And as you look at some of the photographs, you'll see exactly why that's become almost the mantra of the Peninsula Paddle. What's also interesting is to see through different eyes as we walk and paddle this journey with the numbers of people who are starting to do this with us. So far, about 36, I think it is, people have done the paddle right from the one side of the peninsula to the other. And the fun thing about this paddle, by the way, is that people can join in at various stages. They don't have to do the full length. But as we walk and talk, suddenly the participants begin to see new things about a transect through the city of Cape Town that opens their eyes to new ways to see the city. Why is it like this? Why are people living in backyard shacks? Why are they finding in places like this, for instance, as you look through those through your own spectacles, why are people living like this? Why is there such inequality in our city? Why through a space of 27 kilometers is there such difference? And of course we know some of this. We know about the legacies. But the fact that they continue and the voices that people have as we talk to residents along the way is fascinating. Gives you new insights into how the city functions or doesn't function. And we row into some amazing places. This is Princess Flay near Muizenberg. And it's open water. It's been cleared at this stage. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about how some of the work that has been going on to clear these waterways. But it's incredible to paddle through a big city of almost 4 million people in the city of Cape Town and to travel through this part of the city. What's interesting about this particular event, too, is that no one owns it. I'm not the leader of it. Although we provided some leadership to ensure that it's sustained, no one and no one organization is involved. People come and go as they see fit. People on the paddle come and run their own agendas. People on the shores, at Princess Flay in this particular case, come and deliver their own areas of interest to the passing parade, draw people in. We have a whole paddling group who actually get young folk out onto the water and bring boats for them to learn to paddle and so on. We have organizations involved in environmental education who come and set their stalls up on the side of the river and the side of the Princess Flay in this particular case. I really like that. I really like people taking initiative like this and finding something to hook onto in order to reach the kind of mandates that they are working with. And we paddle through this amazing array of roads and bridges and so on. It seems bizarre that there's a M5, a highway of cars flashing by at 100 kilometers per hour, if not more, and you're paddling through the waterways. How exquisite. Where's the tourism companies amongst you and businesses amongst you which says that should be done every day? And if it was done every day, what kind of impact could we have? And so part of what we're doing with this Peninsula Paddle is trying to inspire change, trying to inspire people to think differently. I've got a bit tired, I must admit, of being dragged out to say, will you come and collect litter in the river? And so we come out there and we don't really want to do it, but we feel that because it's part of the organizational plan, we're going to do that. And the next day, horrors upon horrors, the material is all coming down the river again, and you feel, what a waste of time. So how can we do things differently and more creatively in environmental campaigns like this? Very simple ones that is both fun, inspires conversation. So there are two ideas that we've had and held very tightly in this exercise. The one is, can we paddle from one side to the other of the peninsula, that is, in 11 hours in one day? Can we do that? There's a bit of adventure in that. It's not easy. There's a bit of canal climbing. There's a bit of carrying your own kayak at various places, and there's potential for those who bring inflatable boats for it to puncture and so on. There's all sorts of challenges around that. So there's a nice little game to it. It's a fun event. There's a bit of adventure to it as well. But our second one, more importantly, is we're all connected to the waterways. Whether we're rich or poor, no matter where we live in the city, we're part of that same water body. And if we're part of that same water body, we also have an accountability, responsibility for it. What happens in the estuary as toxins begin to accumulate in lakes like Sunflare, for instance, the potential for that to cause harm, common public harm, is certainly very evident there. So we're all responsible for this, and no matter what, our connection is from the land into the waterways, and that connection is there. So it ends off with a fairly fun event too, in which we actually go out to sea and into Table Bay and then up the Dip River and end up at Milton Canoe Club. And that's fun too, because many of us can't get our kayaks to go through the waves, so we often have a few spills along the way, and that's all part of the fun event in that we're doing. We started this 3 years ago, I should say. In 2010 was our first one, and it came because a student who had been studying in my department, Thomas Cousins, said to me, "You know the rivers well in Cape Town. What we'd like to do with a friend of his called Trevor Johnson and an NGO involved in outdoor adventure work, said, let's do something that actually is special." And we talked about the rivers over Google Maps, and they left my office. And I remember distinctly closing the door of my office at that stage and thinking, you know what, you should go and join them. And I ran down, and I managed to catch them in the car park, and I said, I want to be on that trip as well. It was such an inspiring conversation. And out of that, the four of us continued to do this by holding together a party of volunteers who have been magnificent in coming in and out of the organization of this little tour. In 2011, that is what the Black River in Cape Town looked like. And it took us an hour and a half to bring our boats out of that river, portage around the water hyacinth before we could get back into the river again. And we used the media, the local newspapers, to help us to get that story across. In February this year, the Kader Asmal project, which has been based on national funding for public works, has put together a program to deal with the integrated catchments of the city's waterways. And I have to say that they did a magnificent work. In fact, they worked so hard, knowing that we had carte blanche and a few other media personalities in tow, that they cleared tons and tons of weed and solid waste from the rivers. And even on the day, the organizer in the Kader Asmal project said, we were so worried that we were going to get caught that we even brought in a private contractor who charged us for 12 tons of waste that was removed over the weekend. And as we paddled through that thing on that Sunday, the 3rd of June, we saw evidence of these people still working very hard to make sure that it was clean. So it matters, and it does have an impact. It's actually not about the paddle, it's about all the things that are happening before that paddle that I think are making a difference. That's what we're fighting against. Material that is coming down our drainage systems, into our stormwater, and going into the rivers, and getting out into the oceans, and creating, as we've seen pictures in other parts of the world, of the Pacific Ocean, which has become filled with plastics. There's the Kader Asmal project, really interesting one with 2 ideas to it. One, to try and rehabilitate the rivers, to replant them, to take out some of the weed that is accumulating in them, and also to create jobs within the zone. We keep our masks on, says the organizers. Next year, when you do the paddle, you can take your masks off. And I wonder what sort of magic wand they're going to wave, because it's not only about the actual weeds and the plastics, but it's also about the water quality that is very risky. And while we know a lot about the water quality in terms of some of the measurements, some of the water parameters, we've no idea about other viruses, bacteria that are coming through them, because we don't measure them. So what about the endocrine disruptors? What about the things that are affecting our gene pool coming down that water? What about antiretroviral virals that are coming into that water system through poor sanitation and further upstream and so on? Those are complex type questions that we know so little in terms of the answers. The science is not advanced enough for us to be able to answer those kinds of questions. So we keep the masks on to remind people, first of all, that when you paddle, your hands are wet and you don't put them over your face. But we also make sure that the media is well aware that this is an indication of some of the dangers of our urban waters. So we know a lot about the science, and the graph is irrelevant other than showing you that in the Black River at station number 11 and 12, where I take water quality along the way, that things are certainly not looking good at all. Very high levels of bacteria. We shouldn't have contact with water above the red line. I spoke about the media early on, and really wonderful to see people who are celebrities, well-known people, who use their goodwill to participate in events like this. We really depend upon them. And there's Lewis Pugh, another fellow as well, who has just been gracious to be able to enter into these activities because he believes in particular that the oceans are being spoilt hugely by plastics and coming from our river systems and accumulating in the near shore area. I want to quickly talk about the second part of the story. And it's about the different discourses, the different languages, the different narratives that emerge on this Peninsula Paddle. Because we talk to people. We began this idea saying, what are people saying about the environment? What is their social concerns about these waterways, the waterway environments? And so there's two people, and we listened to their stories before, and we hear them say, these waters are smelly, they're polluted, they're dangerous for our kids. There are places where there are crime hotspots. We go to another complete extreme as we go down the river here, and we talk to the Friends of the Liesbeek. And when you go onto their website and you go and listen to them look at their work on Facebook, you hear a completely different language. You hear a language that says, open up the rivers, open up the waterways, make the green spaces and corridors part of our existence in suburbs, leafy suburbs of Newlands and Rondebosch and Mowbray and so on. And so that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking a different view of our river systems, built a magnificent, together with the city and other partners, magnificent pathway down there, and a great place to run. I'm hearing the runners saying it's the most pleasant place to run at the moment in this area. Building new ecological habitats, restoring the area. That's fantastic. But it's amazing that within 8 kilometers of each other, you're hearing such disparate voices, very unequal in terms of their perceptions and access to that riverways. So urban rivers, places to enjoy, pleasurable, adds value to property. Desire to restore this ecological habitat and the importance of trying to restore wetlands. What a different language to people who are struggling with waterways who say, close them up because they're a danger. Let's not have access to them. And then in between, there's another new language emerging from people who take in the fight to their particular cause. And this one is about saving Princess Flay. And here's residents in the Grassy Park area who are beginning to express themselves about our public heritage. And we try to provide them, at least with a voice, to be used in the media as the paddle comes by. But I want to finish off with the last part of the talk, and that is, what's the elephant in the room? Now, if you're not aware of the expression, the elephant in the room, it's the idea, it's an idiom, it's a metaphorical idea to express what's been ignored. What are the things we don't talk about? And I began the question of this talk by saying, what if we had to build water-sensitive cities? What would that mean? And the elephant in the room may become apparent with some of the things I'll show you right now. Well, there's the first one, and it looks at Table Bay in this particular case, and we're looking up at the Milnerton area, and what it probably doesn't actually show you at that stage is further up the west coast, this incredible sprawl of urban development in Cape Town. It's amazing that we have created such an inefficient city. And as it sprawls, it has much greater impacts on the environment and on biodiversity and our waterways as well. And let me explain that a bit more. You can't see the graph probably from where you're sitting, but let me just try and give you some scary figures. First of all, what is scary is that in Africa, we're at the moment sitting at about 37% urbanized overall. By the year 2030, we will be roughly 51% urbanized. By the year 2050, it's quite possible that we'd be 80% urbanized. That should make us sit on the edge of our seat. And I don't know who is necessarily staying awake at night thinking about these scary figures, because it's not something that I'm hearing in the discussions enough in South Africa alone about how we're going to handle our urbanization and the pressure on cities, and in this particular context, the pressure on our waterways. So what does our city look like Cape Town? Well, for instance, already we know that the density is Khayelitsha, Hanover Park, Nyanga, all of those settlements that are settled in and have a history of being in the legacies of apartheid. And how to reverse that is going to be absolutely huge. And you can see the river that I've just taken you through is largely through a fairly low-density area. But the rivers further north of that in the high-density areas are severely trashed already. More important, when you start to look at Cape Town, and again, the map's not that useful, but you can see a whole lot of blue lines all over it, which is our waterways, and there are lots of them. And you can also see in the green lines over here is where our aquifers lie. We're now building a very dense settlement over our water resources for the future, our aquifers. And we're building hardened surfaces over our river systems that are feeding the waterways that I've been speaking about. So they're scary stories when you look at some of our informal settlements. And where they are washing at the moment is where they will be depositing their water after having washed and used other sanitation as well. And it'll be poured into the canal, which is right next to that tap where people are working. That's one of our problems. The canal looks like this. This is the Gateway project, in fact. And the only way to try and protect people from the canal is to build fences around them. And you can see in the water the collection of garbage. But let me not just look at the poor part of our socioeconomic structures in Cape Town. This comes from the leafy suburb, in which water is pouring into the Liesbeek River from a spillage somewhere further up there. And the stormwater drain has been treated as, again, a sewer and a gutter. The river becomes a glorified stormwater gutter. And so our problem in our country is our housing. The elephant in the room? Well, there are probably plenty of them, but here's one of them. And one of them is our housing and our housing policy. Our housing policy, which allows us to spread out and to use up every known piece of the earth. What if Africa changed its housing policy? What if we thought differently about how we are going to house our population in an urbanization transition that's moving faster than we can think of? And I've highlighted an RDP house, but actually it equally goes for houses that have protected themselves and their spaces in this particular way. 2 more slides. And this one shows the model that begins to impress me as to what's happening in Brazil. This is an urban park in the foreground in Rio, and they've used community resources and their local city resources. They run what they call a people's budget, and they've turned a river that was in real trouble and real danger into an urban space. They live in high-rise, compact apartments. And it's amazing to see how the Brazilians are at play in their recreation. They really do use their recreational spaces very well. And I remember standing, watching people playing soccer and watching how the team changed as different players on the side or spectators joined in. And I thought, what an interesting way to think about how community gets together and uses open spaces. And their apartments vary, obviously, in terms of their quality, but they're used to living like that. And in one way, they've been driven to live like that because of crime, and it's easier to contain an apartment block. But they've also got used to it and see it as being part of their upbringing and part of their tradition. This is another one, in fact. This is Porto Alegre, and this is, in fact, a detention pond. So here's a very dense area that actually uses this detention pond to handle some of the floodwaters when it rains. But in between times, it's a soccer field. So how are we using our spaces around these dense urban areas? Can we be more creative in the way these spaces are being used? And so the what-if question is, what if we rethought that our cities could be designed and planned and transformed to recognize the importance of water and the water resources both on the surface and on the ground? what would our cities then look like? Thank you.